Have you watched the previous episode's video? Welcome to the story of this episode, Chapter 41, The Crisis in the Spiritual Spring and the Mysterious Power. With the help of his reverse, time's spiritual power, Sumu struggled to swim towards the center of the spiritual spring. The black tentacles around him were like a group of crazy pythons, constantly lunging at him. The spiritual power-long sword in Sumu's hand danced up and down, and every swing could cut off the approaching tentacles. However, the tentacles seemed endless, surging in waves. The team members on the shore were not idle either. They all cast their spiritual power spells, attacking the tentacles that stretched towards Sumu, trying to clear a path for him. Nevertheless, the attacks of the tentacles were too fierce. The team members' spiritual power spells could only temporarily block the advance of the tentacles and couldn't cause substantial damage to them. Sumu was well aware that time was pressing, and he had to find the source of the tentacles' control as soon as possible. While swimming towards the center of the spiritual spring, he noticed that there seemed to be a black whirlpool at the bottom of the spiritual spring, and all the tentacles were stretching out from there. An idea flashed in Sumu's mind. He guessed that this whirlpool was likely to be the key. Sumu quickened his pace and swam towards the whirlpool. When he got close to the whirlpool, a powerful suction force came from it, trying to suck him in. Sumu tightly grasped his spiritual power-long sword, injected spiritual power into the sword body, and forcefully inserted it into the rock at the bottom of the spiritual spring to resist the suction. During the struggle against the suction force, Sumu detected a familiar evil spiritual power aura emanating from the whirlpool, identical to the spiritual power aura of the dark spirit sect they had encountered before. Sumu knew in his heart that this must be a trap set by the dark spirit sect. Just as Sumu was trying hard to resist the suction, a huge tentacle quietly stretched out from behind him and suddenly wrapped around his body. The tentacle tightened with force, and Sumu felt his breath being squeezed, and his spiritual power shield was also on the verge of collapse under the squeezing of the tentacle. The team members on the shore were extremely anxious when they saw Sumu in danger. They rushed towards the spiritual spring regardless of everything, trying to rescue him. However, more tentacles emerged from the bottom of the water, blocking their way. Sumu knew he couldn't just wait to die like this. He concentrated all his mental energy and circulated his reverse, time spiritual power, attempting to break free from the tentacles' restraint. The reverse, time spiritual power circulated wildly in his body, and the time flow rate around his body underwent a strange change. Under the effect of the reverse, time spiritual power, the movement of the tentacle became sluggish, and Sumu took the opportunity to struggle hard and finally broke free from the tentacle's entanglement. Sumu didn't have time to rest. He swam towards the whirlpool again. This time, he was more cautious, constantly on guard against the tentacles around him. When he reached the edge of the whirlpool, he found a black crystal ball in the center of the whirlpool. The crystal ball emitted a strange light and continuously spewed out evil spiritual power, which was controlling the tentacles. Sumu knew that as long as he destroyed this crystal ball, he could resolve the crisis of the spiritual spring. He took a deep breath, concentrated all the spiritual power in his body on the spiritual, power-long sword in his hand, and then stabbed fiercely at the crystal ball. The moment the spiritual power-long sword pierced the crystal ball trembled violently, and a powerful black spiritual power shockwave burst out from the crystal ball, sending Sumu flying. Sumu fell heavily by the spiritual spring, a trace of blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. But he didn't give up. He struggled to his feet and rushed towards the crystal ball again. This time, he perfectly integrated his reverse, time spiritual power with his own spiritual power, forming an even more powerful force. Sumu waved his spiritual power long sword again, and a sword key shining with a strange light shot towards the crystal ball.
The sword key hit the crystal ball, and the crystal ball let out a crisp sound, with cracks appearing on it. 紧接着, the crystal ball shattered with a bang, turning into countless fragments that scattered all over the ground. With the shattering of the crystal ball, the black tentacles in the spiritual spring disappeared, one after another, and the water surface gradually returned to calm. Sumo and the team members finally heaved a sigh of relief. They knew that resolve the crisis of the spiritual spring. However, Sumu was well aware that this was just part of the Dark Spirit sect's conspiracy. The Dark Spirit sect must have even bigger plans. They had to find out the Dark Spirit sect's next move as soon as possible and prevent their conspiracy from succeeding. Sumo stood up and said to the team members, "Everyone, take a break first to recover your spiritual power. We still need to continue tracking down the Dark Spirit sect. We must not let their conspiracy succeed." The team members nodded one after another. They knew that the road ahead was still full of dangers and challenges. They were all determined to fight against the Dark Spirit sect to the end. The story continues. More exciting content is coming up. Subscribe as soon as possible.